I was stuck in traffic this morning, just a brutal commute, and I found myself staring at the bumper of the car in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
It had one of those very intense religious stickers on it, and right next to it, another car had a sticker that was, let's just say, aggressively skeptical.
The Battle of the Bumpers.
Exactly. And it got me thinking about how we usually talk about God in our culture. It's almost always a courtroom drama, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's a debate. Exhibit A, the beauty of the trees. Exhibit B, the horror of suffering. It's always, here's why you are wrong, or here is why I am right.
It's the eternal wrestling match. You're either trying to prove God exists using logic and science, or you're using those same tools to prove he can't possibly exist. It's so binary.
But what if we're asking the wrong question?
Um,
Or at least skipping a massive step.
okay.
Today, we're doing something a little different. We are looking at a stack of research centered on a really dense but fascinating paper by Tennyson Samraj titled, What the Believer Should Know About Beliefs Associated with God. And I want to be really clear right off the bat. The mission today isn't to convert anyone.
No, and it's not to debunk anything either.
Right. We aren't touching the truth of the matter. We are looking at the architecture of belief. We are exploring how the human mind, using logic, linguistics, consciousness, actually constructs the concept of God. Samraj is essentially asking, is it possible to have a rational conversation about God without needing to, see God standing in the room?
And that's a heavy lift. Usually, if you want to have a rational conversation about something, you need to be able to point at it.
Yeah.
If we're talking about this table, we can both see it. If we're talking about God, the reference point is it's missing.
And that usually stops the conversation cold.
Hmm.
But going through this material, I had a bit of a breakthrough. There is this distinction the author makes. It just clicked for me.
Ah,
It explains why two incredibly smart people can look at the same universe and come to completely opposite conclusions without either of them being, stupid.
you're talking about the distinction between Didicto and Doré.
I am. Didicto and Doré. It sounds like a spell from a fantasy novel.
Or maybe something you'd hear in a very boring law firm.
Exactly. But it's actually the key to this whole deep dive. So break this down for us. What are we actually looking at here?
Okay, so these are Latin terms that are absolutely central to the philosophy of language and metaphysics.
Yeah.
Let's start with Didicto.
Okay.
It literally translates to of what is said.
Of what is said. Got it.
It refers to the definition of a thing, the concept, the words we use to describe it. It's like the dictionary entry.
So if I talk about a bachelor, you know the Didicto definition is an unmarried man.
Immediately.
Right.
You don't need to know which bachelor, you just need the concept.
Okay.
The concept is explicable. You can explain it. Now, Doré translates to of the thing. This refers to the actual physical reality of the object, the specific thing standing in front of you.
Okay, let's use a weirder example to make sure I've got this. Let's talk about a dragon.
Perfect example.
So I can give you a Didicto description of a dragon. Giant lizard, wings, breathes fire, hoards gold.
Right. The concept is clear. We can have a full, rational conversation about dragons. We can discuss their aerodynamics, their hoarding psychology.
Their fire-breathing mechanisms.
All of that is valid Didicto discourse.
But the Doré.
The Doré is missing. You can't point to a dragon. You can't touch one. There is no thing itself to correspond to your words.
So the Didicto is the description, but the Doré would be me actually getting scorched by the fire.
Which you can't do. But here is Samraj's core argument, and this is where it gets really fascinating for the concept of God. He argues that the concept of God is fully Didicto explicable.
So we can define God.
We can. We can use logic to describe attributes like eternal, creator, or all-powerful.
Linguistically, God is a valid concept. It's not just, nonsense.
It's not gibberish. It has a structure. But, Samraj argues, the Doré reality, the actual essence of God as a physical or metaphysical object, is inexplicable. We can't identify God in the same way we identify a chair or a rock.
This is where that carpenter analogy from the text really helped me. Let's unpack that, because I think it grounds this abstract stuff.
It's a classic analogy. Samraj asks us to imagine a table. You walk into a room and you see a table. Now, even if the room is empty, what is it logical to assume?
That someone made it.
Yeah.
Tables don't just, manifest. I mean, the wood grows.
Right.
But the joinery, the polish, that implies a maker.
Right. So looking at the table, you are logically justified in positing the existence of a carpenter.
Okay.
You don't need to see the carpenter to know that the carpenter is a necessary concept for the table to exist. You can define him, the person who built this. That's the Didicto knowledge.
Right.
But, and this is the catch, just looking at the table, does it tell you who the carpenter is?
No.
Does it tell you if he's tall, if he's short, if he's kind, if he's angry? Does it tell you his name?
Not really. I mean, I might be able to guess if he was skilled or sloppy based on the work, but I don't know him. I don't have his phone number.
You don't have direct access to the carpenter. You only have the table. You can infer his existence, but you cannot know his essence.
So, applying this to our deep dive topic,
Yeah.
the universe is the table. We look at it, causes, effects, complexity, gravity, the fact that atoms stick together, and we can logically posit a creator.
We can define that creator, didicto.
But we cannot see the creator standing in the room.
Yeah.
We have no direct evidence.
Right. We can argue about the definition of the creator, but we can't point to him.
And that is the crux of the tension, isn't it? That's why the bumper stickers are fighting. One side is looking at the table and screaming, obviously there is a carpenter.
And the other side is looking around the empty room screaming, I don't see anyone.
That is a perfect summary.
And Samraj points out that we have no a posteriori information about God.
A posteriori, I always get these mixed up. That's knowledge based on experience or observation, right?
Correct. A priori is logic you can do in your head, like math. A posteriori is knowledge you have to go out and find. We have a posteriori knowledge of the table. We can touch it.
But we don't have a posteriori knowledge of God. We can't measure God, weigh God, or put God under a microscope.
Exactly. So while the concept of God is clear and definable, the reality of God remains hidden, which is why you can't prove God in a lab. You are using tools designed for the table to try and measure the carpenter.
It's a category error.
Total category error.
Okay, but this brings up a huge question for me. If we can't see the carpenter, if we have zero physical evidence, how do our brains even come up with the concept in the first place?
That is the million-dollar question.
Why aren't we just satisfied with the table?
Yeah.
If I'm just a biological machine, why do I care about the eternal? I should just care about lunch.
The text mentions something called the intentionality of consciousness. This helps explain why our brains go there.
Intentionality.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds like doing something on purpose, like I intentionally ate that last donut.
It's a little different in philosophy. Intentionality isn't about willpower. It refers to the mind's ability to be about something. It's the aboutness of thought.
So my consciousness is like a spotlight.
Exactly. It can direct its focus toward objects. Like you're focusing on this microphone right now, you perceive it.
Okay.
But here is the magic and honestly, the weirdness of human consciousness. You
Right.
can also focus on things that are not physically present.
Like I can think about what I'm going to have for dinner, even though the food isn't here yet.
You can focus on the future. You can focus on the past. You can focus on pure abstractions like justice or infinity or
Timelessness.
precisely. Samraj argues that because humans are contingent beings, meaning we are caused, we have a beginning and we will have an end, we are acutely aware of our own limitations.
Contingent. That's a polite way of saying temporary.
We are temporary. We depend on other things to exist. Oxygen, food, gravity. Take those away and we cease to be.
I feel that contingency every time I look in the mirror and see a new gray hair. It's a reminder that I am not permanent.
We all feel it. But because we are aware of being contingent, our consciousness can naturally project the opposite concept. We can conceptualize a being that is not contingent.
A being that is necessary, eternal, and uncaused.
We can imagine it.
So our belief isn't necessarily a reaction to seeing God. It's a reaction to seeing ourselves.
That's a profound way to put it. We understand time, so we can imagine timelessness. We understand caused, so we can imagine uncaused. We define God by what we are not.
This leads us right to one of the most famous problems in philosophy, which Samraj cites in the paper. Thomas Nagel's What Is It Like to Be a Bat?
Oh, this is a classic.
I remember reading this in college. It sounds like the setup to a joke, but it's actually really deep.
It is. Nagel asks us to imagine the inner life of a bat. Now think about a bat. We know a bat exists. We know how it uses sonar to navigate. We know it hangs upside down. We have all the objective scientific facts.
Right. I can explain the biology of a bat perfectly.
Do you know what it feels like to be a bat?
I can imagine it. I can close my eyes and imagine screeching and flying around in the dark.
But Nagel would argue that is just you, a human, imagining what it would be like if you were a bat. You aren't actually accessing the bat's consciousness. You don't know what sonar feels like as a sensory input. The essence of the bat is locked away from you because your consciousness is structured differently.
We are running different operating systems.
Precisely. We have the didicto knowledge of the bat, the facts, but we lack the Dirac experience of the bat's inner life.
So bringing this back to God, Samraj is saying we are in the same boat.
In a way, yes, but the gap is infinitely wider. If we can't even fully grasp the essence of a bat, which is a fellow mammal.
How could we possibly grasp the essence of an infinite God?
Right.
That makes sense. We're trying to download the entire internet onto a floppy disk. The hardware just doesn't support the file size.
That's a fantastic analogy. Samraj argues that God's identity is inexplicable to us. We can use our words eternal, omnipotent, but those are just human concepts trying to map onto a reality that is fundamentally different from our own.
So we are stuck with the definitions, but blocked from the reality.
And this brings us to a tricky linguistic problem the paper highlights. The problem of the word is.
Oh, is. 2 letters, 1 syllable, and apparently a nightmare for philosophers.
It is surprisingly complex. The paper distinguishes between the is of existence and the is of essence,
Okay.
or establishing that something is versus what something is.
Right, let's break that down. The text uses water as the prime example.
Yeah. Think about water. We know water exists, but we also know what water is. It is H2O.
And we know that because we tested it. We put it in a beaker, ran electricity through it, and boom, hydrogen and oxygen.
Exactly. That is an a posteriori necessity. We discovered the essence of water through observation. We can say water is H2O with scientific certainty. It's verifiable.
But Samraj points out we can't do this for God.
We can't. We cannot say God is blank in the same way we say water is H2O.
Because we can't get God into the beaker.
We can't get the essence into the lab. We can say God is the creator as a definition, but we can't verify that connection empirically like we can with hydrogen and oxygen.
This leads to the distinction between logical necessity and factual necessity.
It does.
I remember this from the notes. Logical necessity is like math, right? 2 + 2 = 4.
Yes. Yeah. 2 + 2 = 4 is true in all possible worlds. It doesn't matter if you're in New York or on Mars. It's a logical puzzle that solves itself. It cannot be otherwise.
And some people try to argue that God exists in this same way. Like, if you just do the mental math correctly, the answer God pops out at the end.
Right. The ontological argument is a famous version of this. It tries to prove God exists purely through logic, but Samraj and many other philosophers say no. God is not a math equation.
So what is he?
The paper argues God is a factual necessity or a brute fact.
Brute fact. I like that term. It sounds sturdy. What does it actually mean?
A brute fact is something that just is. It doesn't depend on anything else for its existence. It doesn't have a cause. It doesn't have an explanation outside of itself.
It's the bottom turtle.
Basically, the paper argues that God's existence is a brute fact. You can't use logic to force God into existence. You have to accept the possibility that this being just exists, independent of our logic or our universe.
So it's not a puzzle to be solved. It's a foundational block. It's either there or it's not.
Exactly. And because it's a brute fact that we can't verify with our eyes or our instruments, because the carpenter isn't standing next to the table, we arrive at the most crucial point of the paper.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
This is it. The nature of belief itself, the shift from how do we know to how do we choose.
The paper uses these acronyms, JTB and JBD. Can you decode those for us?
Sure. JTB stands for Justified True Belief. This is the gold standard in traditional epistemology, the study of knowledge. For something to be considered knowledge, 3 things need to happen.
Okay, hit me.
1, you have to believe it. 2, it has to actually be true. And 3, you have to have justification.
Justification usually means evidence.
Right, like I know it is raining, I believe it is actually raining, and my justification is that I am standing outside and I am getting wet.
That's JTB, Justified True Belief.
Perfect. But Samraj argues that when it comes to God, JTB doesn't work. We are missing the evidence part in the traditional sense.
Because we have no direct proof. We aren't getting wet.
We aren't. So we can't claim we know God exists in the same way we know it's raining, not if you're using that standard.
Okay.
So he proposes a shift to JBD, justified belief decision.
Justified belief decision.
Yeah.
That word decision really changes the texture of this, doesn't it?
It changed everything. It implies that belief isn't a conclusion you arrive at after reviewing the evidence file. It's a decision you make.
The paper makes a very strong statement here. Humans are not born theists or atheists.
That's interesting, right? I think we often assume people are wired one way or the other. You know, she's just a spiritual person or he's just a skeptic.
But the source material argues otherwise. Because The truth of God is hidden.
Because the carpenters are not standing by the table. Every single person is in the same position. We all have to make a choice. We choose to believe or we choose to disbelieve.
But is that rational? I mean, if I just choose to believe there's $1 million in my bank account, that's not a justified belief decision. That's just a delusion.
That's just you bouncing a check.
Right.
But here's why Samraj says the decision about God is justified. Remember the didicto part, the definition.
Right. The concept is logical.
Yeah.
It's coherent.
Because the concept of God is coherent, it makes sense logically. It addresses questions about why there is something rather than nothing. It addresses our intuition about design. The decision to believe is justified.
So it's not a blind leap into nonsense.
It's not. It's a calculated step into a coherent worldview.
So it's like, okay, imagine you're at a fork in the road. You
Yeah.
don't have a map, no Dewey proof, but one path looks paved and heads in the direction you think the city is based on the sun and the terrain.
Yeah.
Taking that path is a decision, but it's a rational decision.
That's a great way to put it. And the atheist is making a similar decision. They look at the same lack of map and perhaps the lack of a visible city skyline and decide the path leads nowhere. Both are decisions. Neither is compelled by absolute proof.
This really reframes the whole faith versus science debate for me. It feels like we're usually screaming about evidence, but this paper suggests we're arguing about a choice.
It levels the playing field. It acknowledges that uncertainty is built into the system. If God's reality were as obvious as the sun and the sky, belief wouldn't be a choice.
It would just be observation.
Right. You don't believe in the sun, you just see it. You don't have faith in gravity.
You just fall.
Exactly. The fact that God is hidden, that the Dewey existence is inexplicable, is actually what makes faith possible. It preserves the freedom of the human mind to accept or reject the concept.
There is a quote in the source material that really stuck with me. It says, "The truth of what we believe about God is God only to those who understand the essence of God."
It's a dense sentence, but it's profound. It implies that the truth isn't something sitting out there waiting to be found like a lost set of keys. The truth becomes real in the act of understanding and believing.
So if you don't make the choice, the truth remains inaccessible to you.
Correct. It connects back to the bat analogy. You can't know the bat from the outside. You have to be the bat. In a religious context, Samraj seems to imply you can't know the truth of God from the outside looking for proof.
You have to step inside the belief system to experience the essence.
It's the difference between reading a menu and eating the meal. Yes, the menu is didicto. It has descriptions, spicy, savory, grilled. You can analyze the menu. You can critique the font. You can debate the prices.
But reading the word spicy isn't the same thing as burning your tongue.
The meal is the Dewey. And you can't argue about the taste of the meal if you're only looking at the menu. You have to make the decision to order.
Wow. Okay, let's bring this all together. We started with the question of whether we can have a rational talk about God without proof.
And I think the answer is yes. We've seen that we can clearly define what we mean by God, didicto. We can have a sophisticated conversation about the concept.
And we've acknowledged that we can't empirically identify God in the physical world.
Yeah.
Dewey. We're looking at the table, but the carpenter isn't in the room.
We've looked at how our consciousness is built to handle these big, abstract ideas, the intentionality that lets us think about the eternal, even though we are just temporarily little creatures wondering about our gray hairs.
And finally, we've landed on this idea that because the brute fact of God is hidden, belief is ultimately a justified belief decision. It's a choice that shapes our reality, rather than a reality that forces our choice.
It really takes the pressure off, doesn't it? You don't have to wait for the burning bush. You don't have to wait for the scientist to discover the God particle. You just have to look at the architecture of your own mind and the world around you and decide which explanation makes the most sense.
It empowers the thinker. You aren't a passive recipient of data. You are an active participant in defining your worldview.
Exactly.
So here is where we leave you today, listeners. We usually end with a takeaway, but today I want to leave you with a question that lingers from this deep dive.
If belief is indeed a decision and not just a reaction to evidence, then what does your decision say about you?
Oh, I like that.
If the universe is a Rorschach test, an ink blot that looks like chaos to some and a masterpiece to others, then what you see might tell you more about the observer than the object.
So the question isn't just, does God exist?
The question is the concept of God believable enough for you to choose it?
And if you choose it, does that choice unlock a truth that was invisible before? Does tasting the meal change how you read the menu?
That is the question.
That is something to chew on while you're stuck in traffic today staring at bumper stickers.
Thanks for diving deep with us into the philosophy of belief. We'll see you on the next one.